Ego death vs. spiritual awakening. What's really happening to you? You're standing at the edge of yourself, looking down into something that has no bottom. Everything you were so certain about, your identity, your beliefs, the story you've been telling yourself about who you are, it's all becoming transparent. See through. Like you're watching a movie you've seen 1,000 times, except now you can see the strings, the stage, the actors pretending. And you can't unsee it. Maybe it happened suddenly. A psychedelic experience that tore open the fabric of your reality. A meditation that went too deep. A loss so profound it shattered every framework you had for making sense of the world. Or maybe it's been creeping in slowly, this growing sense that you're not who you thought you were, that nothing is quite what it seemed. People keep using these words around you: ego death, spiritual awakening, enlightenment, transformation. And you're nodding along, but inside you're thinking, I don't know what's happening to me. Am I dying? Am I being born? Am I losing my mind or finally finding it? Here's what no one tells you about these moments. They feel exactly the same as falling apart. The dissolution of ego and the emergence of deeper consciousness, they both hurt. They both feel like the end of everything you've known. And that's because, in a very real sense, they are. But there's a difference, a crucial difference. And understanding it might be the only thing standing between you and complete psychological disintegration. Let me tell you what you're experiencing right now. You wake up in the morning, and there's this moment just a split second before full consciousness arrives, where you don't know who you are. And instead of that feeling passing like it used to, it lingers. You go through your day, and you're performing yourself, going through the motions of being the person everyone expects. But there's this observer watching it all happen, and that observer feels more real than the person performing. You look at your accomplishments, your relationships, your carefully constructed life, and you feel nothing, not depression exactly, not numbness, something stranger, distance, like you're looking at someone else's life through a window. The things that used to matter, the career advancement, the social status, the image you maintained, the goals you were chasing, they suddenly seem absurd, hollow, like toys you've outgrown but everyone around you is still playing with, still taking seriously, and you want to shake them and say, don't you see, none of this is real, none of this matters. But you can't, because you're not sure if you're the one who's finally seeing clearly, or if you're the one who's lost the plot entirely. Your relationships feel different too. You can see through people's masks now, their personas, their defenses. Not in a judgmental way. In fact, you feel more compassion than ever, but you can't engage with the surface anymore. Small talk feels impossible. Pretense feels suffocating. You're craving depth, authenticity, truth, and everyone around you seems content to keep dancing in the shallows. Some people call this depression. Your well-meaning friends suggest therapy, medication, self-care. And maybe you try those things, but they don't quite touch what you're experiencing, because what you're experiencing isn't an illness. It's not a chemical imbalance or a mood disorder. It's an awakening or a death, or both. And here's where it gets confusing. You've heard these terms thrown around in spiritual circles. Ego death. It sounds poetic, transformative, even desirable. Spiritual awakening and enlightenment, transcendence, becoming your highest self. The Instagram posts make it look beautiful. The books make it sound profound but manageable. No one prepared you for how terrifying it actually is. No one told you that losing your sense of self would feel like actual dying. That questioning everything you've built your identity on would create this vertigo, this groundlessness, this sensation of falling through empty space with nothing to grab onto. You're scared, not of external threats, but of this internal dissolution. You're scared that if you let go completely, there won't be anything left. That the person you've been will disappear and nothing will replace them. That you'll be empty, void, gone. So let's talk about what's actually happening in the architecture of your psyche. Carl Jung understood something that most spiritual traditions knew but few could articulate in psychological terms. The ego is not your enemy, but it's also not who you really are. The ego is a construction, a necessary construction, but a construction nonetheless. You see, the ego is the story you tell about yourself. It's the narrator of your experience. It's the sense of I that wakes up in the morning and says, I am me, and I'm separate from everything else. It's your name, your history, your roles, your beliefs, your preferences, your personality. It's the character you've been playing in the movie of your life. And for most of your life, this has worked. The ego has done its job. It helped you navigate the world, make decisions, form relationships, create meaning. It gave you boundaries, a sense of continuity, a stable reference point. But the ego is, by its very nature, defensive. It maintains itself through exclusion. I am this, therefore I am not that. It creates a rigid sense of self by constantly reinforcing what belongs to me and what doesn't. It builds walls, it curates, it controls. What you're experiencing now is the ego's walls beginning to crack. This can happen in two fundamentally different ways, and understanding the difference is critical. The first is ego death. True ego death is a temporary dissolution of the ego structure. It's what happens in deep meditative states, in mystical experiences, in properly supported psychedelic journeys. The boundaries between self and other become permeable. The sense of being a separate, isolated individual dissolves. You experience what mystics call unity consciousness, the direct recognition that you and the universe are not two separate things. During ego death, the narrator goes silent, the story stops. There's just pure awareness, pure presence, pure being. No separation between observer and observed, no past, no future, just this eternal now. It's simultaneously the most terrifying and most liberating experience a human being can have. But here's the crucial part. Ego death is temporary, and it's meant to be. You return. The ego reconstructs itself. But it returns different, more transparent, more flexible. You've seen behind the curtain. You know now that the self you take to be solid and permanent is actually fluid and constructed. And that changes everything. The second path is spiritual awakening. This isn't a single moment of dissolution, but a gradual process of expansion. Jung called it individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are beneath all the conditioning, all the personas, all the false selves you've constructed to survive and be accepted. Spiritual awakening doesn't destroy the ego. It contextualizes it. It reveals that the ego is not the entirety of who you are but just one small part of a much larger self, with a capital S. This deeper self includes your ego, but also your shadow, your unlived potential, your connection to something greater than your individual existence. Where ego death is sudden and dramatic, spiritual awakening is slow and integrative. It's not about losing yourself, but about finding more of yourself. Not about transcending the human experience, but about becoming more fully human. And here's what you need to understand. What you're experiencing right now is probably not pure ego death or pure spiritual awakening. It's the messy, complicated middle ground where both are happening simultaneously. You're having glimpses of ego death moments where your sense of self dissolves, where you feel that cosmic emptiness. that terrifying and exhilarating freedom from being anyone at all. But you're also in the midst of awakening, a longer process of the self emerging, of your deeper nature demanding recognition, of parts of you that have been buried in shadow finally asking to be seen. This is why it feels so confusing, why some moments feel transcendent and others feel like you're losing your mind, why sometimes you feel expanded and connected to everything, and other times you feel fragmented and disconnected from even yourself. The ego is dying, not completely, not permanently, but in the way that old skin must die before new skin can grow. You're in the molting, the metamorphosis, and just like a caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly overnight, you don't awaken overnight. What you're discovering, and what terrifies you most, is that you were never just one thing. The persona you've been presenting to the world, the person you thought you were, that was only ever a partial truth. A role you were playing, yes, but also a defense mechanism, a way of keeping certain truths at bay. You've been living with a shadow, we all have. These are the parts of ourselves we've deemed unacceptable, the qualities we've repressed, the desires we've denied, the aspects of our nature we've hidden even from ourselves. Your nice, respectable self couldn't contain your wildness, your anger, your sexuality, your selfishness, your darkness, your power. So you pushed those things down into the unconscious, but they didn't disappear. They've been there all along, running the show from behind the scenes. And now, in this awakening, they're demanding integration. This is why everything feels like it's falling apart. The ego structure you built was designed specifically to keep these shadow elements at bay. But consciousness wants wholeness. The self, that deeper, wiser part of you, wants all of you, not just the acceptable parts. And so it's orchestrating this dissolution, this breaking down of the walls, not to destroy you but to liberate you. What seems like chaos is actually order being established at a higher level. What seems like death is actually birth. What seems like madness is actually the beginning of genuine sanity. You're not losing yourself. You're losing the false self. The constructed self, the defended self, and yes, that loss is real. There's grief in it. You're mourning the death of the person you thought you were. But underneath that grief is something else, something vast, something that's always been there, waiting. The mystics throughout history have tried to describe this. They called it the awakening to your true nature, the recognition of the divine within, the return to your original face before you were born. Jung called it the realization of the self, different words pointing to the same truth. You are not the small, separate, defended ego. You are something infinitely larger, something connected to everything, something that cannot be destroyed because it was never born. But you can't just think your way to this realization. You can't philosophy your way through ego death. You have to feel it. You have to go through the fire of dissolution. You have to let the old structures burn. And that's what's happening to you now. The question isn't whether you should go through this. You're already in it. The question is, will you resist or will you surrender? Will you try to reconstruct the old ego as quickly as possible? Or will you stay in this liminal space long enough to allow something genuinely new to emerge? So, what do you do with all of this? How do you navigate this territory between death and rebirth? First, you stop pathologizing your experience. What you're going through isn't a breakdown, even though it feels like one. It's not something to be fixed or medicated away. It's an initiation, a threshold, a necessary destruction that precedes genuine transformation. You honor the grief. You let yourself mourn the person you were. That person served you. They protected you. They got you this far. It's okay to feel the loss even as you recognize that loss is necessary. You stay with the discomfort. This is perhaps the hardest part. Everything in you wants to rush toward resolution, toward a new stable identity, toward solid ground. But genuine awakening requires that you learn to tolerate groundlessness, to sit in the not knowing, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You pay attention to what's emerging from the shadow. Your dreams, your sudden impulses, your irrational reactions, the parts of yourself you judge most harshly. These are trying to tell you something. They're not problems to be solved. They're lost parts of yourself asking to come home. You find guides, but choose them carefully. Not everyone who uses spiritual language understands the psychological depths of this process. You need people who have been through their own dark night, who have done their own shadow work, who can hold space for the complexity of what you're experiencing without trying to fix you or rush you, or make it more comfortable than it needs to be. You create containers for the chaos. Meditation, journaling, therapy, creative expression, time in nature. These aren't escapes from the process, but ways of working with it consciously. They give form to the formless, language to the unspeakable, structure to the dissolution. And most importantly, you trust the process. Something in you knows what it's doing. The self is guiding this, even when the ego is terrified. Evolution is painful. Growth is painful. Consciousness expanding to include more of reality is painful. But it's also the most meaningful thing you'll ever do. You're not being destroyed, you're being revealed. Layer by layer, defense by defense, the person you've always been underneath all the conditioning is emerging. And yes, it's terrifying, because you don't know yet who that person is. You're meeting yourself for the first time. But here's the paradox that might save you. The more you lose yourself, the more you find yourself. The more the ego dissolves, the more you discover what's underneath it, not emptiness, not void, but fullness. An awareness that was there before you learned your name. A presence that will be there after every identity you've ever held has dissolved. A consciousness that is both uniquely you and connected to everything that exists. This moment, you're in this terrifying, disorienting, groundless moment. It won't last forever. But it will change you forever. You'll reconstruct an ego, yes. You'll find a new way of being in the world. But it will be more transparent, more fluid, more authentic. You'll never again be able to fully believe in the solidity of your separate self. You'll never again forget that underneath the role you're playing is something vast and mysterious and utterly beyond conceptual understanding. And that knowledge, that lived experience of your true nature, it will make you more human, not less. More connected, not more isolated. More alive, not more detached. Because when you stop defending the false self so rigidly, you finally have the freedom to show up as you truly are. This is what's really happening to you, not destruction, not madness, not spiritual bypass or psychological collapse. Evolution, initiation, awakening, the death of who you were, the birth of who you truly are, and the courage to live in the space between until you can no longer tell the difference.